Sometimes the darkest stories begin on the most ordinary days. It was a summer afternoon in Lemoore, California, a small town wrapped in sunlight and routine, where people smiled at each other in the grocery store and children rode their bikes until dinner. Debbie Hawk was one of those faces everyone knew. 46 years old, a mother of 3, a woman whose warmth seemed to make any room softer. Her life wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Between work at the bank and raising her children alone, she carried herself with quiet determination. Her laugh, gentle but real, was the kind that could make even the hardest day seem survivable. June 12, 2006, a day like any other. She made breakfast, drove her kids to school, and promised, like always, that she'd be home by dinner. But that promise was one she would never keep. When night came, the house sat silent. Her children waited, bowls of cereal untouched. The clock ticked past midnight, and outside, a soft wind blew through the open front door. Debbie Hawk was gone. Every town has its secrets. This one began with a mother who didn't come home. By morning, neighbors noticed something strange. Debbie's car, missing. Her purse, still on the kitchen counter. Her phone, on the floor. The kids said they'd gone to sleep before she got home. When they woke up, the house was quiet. Too quiet. A single glass lay shattered on the kitchen tile. No forced entry, no footprints. Just the eerie stillness of a place where something terrible had happened. Quietly. Police were called. They searched the house inch by inch, but found no trace of where she'd gone. Friends gathered outside, whispering, Debbie would never leave her kids. And they were right. Debbie wasn't the kind of woman who ran away. She was the kind of woman who showed up, every single time. That's why, when her ex-husband Tracy arrived at the scene, something about him felt off, calm, detached. He didn't ask where she was. He just said, I'm sure she'll turn up. The words felt wrong, the tone colder than grief. Sometimes the person who looks most calm is the one who already knows the ending. Tracy Fulcher was Debbie's ex-husband, the father of her children, and the last person many would ever suspect. He lived only a few miles away. Their divorce had been bitter, filled with arguments over money and time with the kids. Still, Debbie believed in keeping things civil. She believed that people, deep down, were capable of good. But as detectives began their investigation, small things started to unravel. Tracy's story didn't line up. He claimed he'd been home all night, but phone records told a different story. A late-night call pinged from a cell tower just a few miles from Debbie's neighborhood. When police asked about it, he shrugged and said, I probably just went for a drive. Detectives noticed his calmness again, the kind of calm that feels rehearsed, as if he had already practiced how to look sad without actually feeling it. And somewhere deep down, they started to suspect he wasn't worried about finding Debbie, he was worried about being found out. The scariest thing about evil is how ordinary it looks. As the days passed, the search for Debbie grew desperate. Posters filled the town. Volunteers searched the countryside. Local news stations aired her picture every night, her warm smile frozen on every screen. People began locking their doors. Parents held their kids tighter. Because if something could happen to Debbie Hawk, it could happen to anyone. Police started to learn more about Tracy's life. Money problems, debt piling up, a failed business, and then a discovery that sent chills through every investigator in the room. a life insurance policy on Debbie's name, worth nearly $1 million. Tracy was the sole beneficiary. It was suddenly clear, if Debbie was gone, Tracy gained everything. And if she came back, he lost it all. The line between love and control is thinner than we think. Friends of Debbie began to speak up. They described her as strong, but lately anxious. She had mentioned that Tracy had been watching her, that he showed up unexpectedly, that he always seemed to know where she was. She'd told one friend, "Sometimes I feel like he's waiting for me to make a mistake." It wasn't fear of a stranger. It was fear of someone she once trusted completely. Detectives started focusing harder on him. They examined his car, freshly cleaned, spotless inside. Too spotless. Traces of bleach lingered faintly in the trunk. And for seasoned investigators, that smell meant one thing. Someone was trying to erase the truth. But still, without a body, there was no proof of murder. Tracy walked free, and the case began to cool. Yet behind every unanswered question, there was a quiet certainty growing stronger. Debbie wasn't missing. She was gone. And the man who smiled too easily knew exactly why. Every lie leaves a trail, even the ones told with a straight face. Months passed. Posters faded in the California sun. The search parties ended. But inside the police station, detectives refused to stop. They kept looking at Tracy Fulcher. Every story he told had cracks. He said he stayed home, but his truck's odometer showed extra miles, miles that had no explanation. He said he cleaned his car because it was dirty, but under ultraviolet light, tiny red stains glowed back at them. The lab confirmed what they feared. The stains were human blood. Still, there wasn't enough to charge him. No weapon, no body. The case stayed open, but it was starting to feel hopeless. Sometimes, the hardest thing about justice is waiting for the truth to catch up. Sometimes, the truth hides in the words we're too afraid to say. Debbie's 3 children tried to move on, but how do you live normally when your whole world has vanished overnight? The oldest daughter, now a teenager, stopped talking about her mom. The middle child withdrew, quiet, watchful. The youngest asked every night before bed, "When is Mom coming home?" At school, a teacher noticed their drawings, dark shapes, sad faces, and always a car. She asked gently, "Sweetheart, whose car is that?" The answer was soft, almost whispered, "Daddy's." That small voice reopened the case. Police went back to the beginning. The car, the night, the lies, everything. Because children may not understand everything, but they feel the truth long before adults do. The truth doesn't disappear, it waits to be found. When the evidence team rechecked Tracy's car, they found something missed the first time. A single strand of blonde hair, wedged deep in the trunk lining. DNA results came back days later. It was Debbie's. That tiny strand became everything. A quiet, unbreakable piece of truth. Detectives finally had proof she'd been in that car, after she'd supposedly gone missing. But still, without a body, the district attorney hesitated. For now, all they could do was keep watching him, waiting, hoping he'd slip. And he did. Because guilt, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to surface. When people stay silent, sometimes the earth tells the truth. 3 long years passed. The case grew cold, The town tried to forget. Then, one morning in 2009, a farmer plowing his field outside of town noticed his tractor hit something solid. He stopped the engine, walked over, and saw what looked like white fragments rising from the dirt. He thought it might be animal bones, but as he looked closer, his chest tightened. They weren't animal bones. They were human. Forensics confirmed it. The remains belonged to Debbie Hawk. Her body had been hidden beneath the earth for years, but the ground doesn't keep secrets forever. Eventually, it gives them back. And that day, the truth finally began to speak. Justice moves slowly, but it never forgets where to go. Detectives drove to Tracy's house. They didn't need to knock. He opened the door calmly, as if he'd been waiting for them. They told him they'd found Debbie. He blinked once, and for the first time in 3 years, his calm cracked. Inside his home, police found more evidence. Pieces of rope matching fibers from Debbie's house, burned fabric in a fire pit, traces of blood beneath layers of paint in his garage. There was no denying it now. No way to explain it away. Tracy Fulcher was arrested for the murder of his ex-wife, the mother of his children, the woman who once trusted him completely. The arrest brought silence to the whole town. Not relief, not celebration, just silence. The heavy kind that comes when everyone realizes that evil had been living right next door. When the truth finally speaks, the world goes quiet to listen. The trial of Tracy Fulcher began 3 years after Debbie's body was found. Reporters filled the seats. Her children sat in the front row, their faces calm but pale. The prosecution laid everything bare: the insurance policy, the blood in the car, the hair in the trunk, the debt, the motive, the opportunity. Every piece of evidence stacked up like bricks, closing in on a man who thought he could bury the truth. The defense tried to fight back. They said the evidence was circumstantial, that the hair could have come from a visit before the disappearance, that the blood, contamination. But deep down, everyone in that room already knew. They could feel it. The coldness in his eyes, the way he stared at nothing, not even his children. And when Debbie's oldest daughter took the stand, the entire courtroom held its breath. Sometimes justice begins with the courage to speak. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone. She looked at the man who had raised her and destroyed her family. Her voice was quiet but clear. She said, "I remember the night Mom disappeared. He told us she just needed time away. But I knew he was lying. I could feel it." The judge watched her. The jury barely blinked. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was simple, painfully human. A child telling the truth about a parent, and in doing so, breaking the last thread of control he ever had. In that silence, everyone could feel what Debbie must have felt in her final moments: fear, disbelief, and a realization too late that trust can sometimes be deadly. Some truths take years to surface, but they never drown. After weeks of testimony, the jury left the courtroom to deliberate. 4 hours later, they returned. Tracy Fulcher, guilty of first-degree murder. He didn't move, didn't cry, didn't look at anyone. Debbie's children held each other. Their grandmother wept quietly behind them. It wasn't victory. It wasn't even closure. Just a sense of stillness, like the end of a storm that leaves everything standing but changed forever. Justice had come, but it had come at a cost no one should ever have to pay. Death ends a life, but it doesn't silence a voice. At the sentencing, Debbie's daughter stood again. This time she read a letter. "Mom, I'll never forget your smile. I'll never forget how you told me to stay strong when things got hard. I promise I'll keep telling your story until people remember your kindness more than his cruelty." The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of her voice. And even though Debbie wasn't there, her presence filled that space. In the words of her child, in the tears of strangers, in the quiet reminder that love is stronger than violence. When she finished reading, the judge looked down and said only one thing: "Your mother would be proud of you." Evil rarely begins with a scream. It begins with control. After the trial, people started asking the same question: how could something like this happen? And the answer wasn't simple, because violence like this doesn't start with fists. It starts with words, with isolation, with fear, with someone deciding that they get to control another person's life. Debbie's friends recalled small signs, moments when she brushed off worry, little stories about him showing up unannounced, checking her phone, criticizing who she spent time with. They all seemed minor then, but together they were warnings. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all. What happened to Debbie didn't begin the night she died. It began long before, with the slow erosion of freedom and the quiet disappearance of safety inside her own home. Grief can destroy a heart, or it can teach it how to shine. Every June, the people of Lemoore gather at sunset. They light candles, they hold hands, and they remember Debbie Hawk. Her friends talk about her laugh, the way she made everyone feel seen. Her children speak quietly about her warmth, her cooking, her little notes tucked into lunchboxes. But there's something more than grief in the air now. It's purpose. A promise that her death won't be just a tragedy, it'll be a warning, a lesson, and maybe even a light for someone else. The vigil isn't about pain anymore. It's about resilience. Because even after everything, this family still chooses love. And maybe that's what strength really is. Loving again, even when the world gives you every reason not to. One person's story can change the choices of thousands. In the years that followed, Debbie's case reached far beyond her small town. Her story was told in classrooms, training sessions for law enforcement, and community centers across California. Police departments began paying more attention to domestic violence red flags. They started asking better questions, listening for the silences between words. And survivors, women who had never spoken before, began to come forward. They said, "I heard her story, and I realized I might not survive mine if I stay quiet." Debbie's voice lived on through the bravery she inspired. Even in death, she was still saving lives. Justice isn't one loud act. It's 1,000 quiet ones. Behind every solved case, there are people whose names you'll never know. The detectives who refuse to give up. The forensic tech who found one single hair. The farmer who made a call instead of looking away. Each of them became a part of her story, not by seeking fame, but by choosing integrity. That's what real heroism looks like. It's not about being fearless, it's about acting, even when your voice shakes. And maybe that's something we all need to remember. Sometimes, the difference between silence and justice is just one person deciding to do the right thing, even when no one's watching. Some stories break you open just to show you what matters. Debbie's children grew up carrying two truths. One, that their father took something precious. And two, that their mother's love was stronger than what he did. They learned to speak about domestic abuse, to help others recognize danger before it's too late. At events, they share their mother's story, not for sympathy, but as a message. Pay attention. Trust your instincts. If you feel unsafe, that feeling is telling you something real. Because evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it looks like someone who says, "I'd never hurt you." And sometimes it's the person who knows exactly how to make you doubt yourself. Time doesn't erase pain. It teaches you how to carry it differently. Years have passed since Debbie's death. Her home has new owners. Her children are grown now, each finding their own path, their own kind of peace. But every time someone new moves to town, the locals tell her story. Not as gossip, not as a warning, but as a lesson about strength and about the quiet courage that comes from facing the unthinkable and surviving anyway. At her gravesite, her family often brings sunflowers, her favorite. They stand together, and for a moment, the pain fades, because the love remains. And in the soft California breeze, it almost feels like she's still there, smiling, grateful, and free. Trust is the most beautiful gift we give, and the most dangerous when given to the wrong heart. Debbie trusted people easily. It was one of her best qualities. She believed love could fix broken things, that forgiveness was strength. And yet, that same trust became the weapon used against her. She couldn't have known that behind calm eyes and quiet smiles was a plan, not built on passion, but on greed and control. What happened to Debbie wasn't a moment of anger, it was a decision. And that's why her story matters, because it reminds us that trust is sacred, that it should never be blind, never be used to silence our instincts. Trust the people who earn it, but never lose the ability to question when something doesn't feel right. Behind every headline is a human story, one that deserves to be remembered gently. When the news cycle ended, the world moved on. New stories, new tragedies. But for those who loved her, the story never really ended. It lived on in birthdays missed, in milestones without her laughter, in the small daily moments where she should have been. Her friends still tell stories about how she made them laugh on their worst days, how she never forgot a birthday, how she loved deeply, even when life wasn't fair. Those memories, that's who she truly was. Not the victim of a headline, but a woman who lived and gave and mattered. You can't choose how your story ends, but you can choose what it stands for. The Hawk family made a choice. They decided that Debbie's name would stand for hope, not for tragedy. They began speaking publicly about domestic violence and control. They worked with organizations that help women find safety and support. Her story became a bridge, turning pain into protection, fear into awareness. And maybe that's the most powerful thing any of us can do. Take something unbearable and make it meaningful. Because when you use your scars to light someone else's path, you become the proof that healing is possible. The monsters in this world don't always look like monsters. Debbie's story reminds us that evil can live quietly in the house next door, or in the smile of someone you thought you knew. It teaches us that intuition is not paranoia, that your discomfort, your unease, is often your heart warning you that something isn't right. If you ever find yourself afraid or questioning your safety, listen to that voice. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Debbie didn't get the chance to listen to hers in time, but you can. And maybe that's how her story saves another life, by reminding us to trust our instincts more than our illusions. Her life ended in silence, but her story still speaks. Today, her children are grown. They smile when they talk about her. They say her favorite flowers were sunflowers because she believed they always found the light. And maybe that's the best way to remember her, as a light that keeps shining, long after the darkness tried to put it out. Her story isn't just about loss. It's about love, about listening, about learning to trust again, but wisely this time. So, if you take one thing from this story, let it be this: pay attention, love deeply, trust carefully, and never let fear silence your truth. Because, in the end, the greatest justice we can give the lost is to live with more awareness and to make sure their stories never fade into the quiet.